Billionaire saw his maid's daughter teaching his son a secret language. The truth left him speechless. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. In the heart of the city, where the skyscrapers touched the clouds, there was a mansion that stood like a fortress of wealth and power. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive leather, freshly polished marble, and the quiet hum of privilege. But amid all this, something unexpected was happening in the mansion's grandest room. The room, with its gleaming chandeliers and polished wooden floors, was where Ethan, the billionaire's son, sat, looking a bit confused. His father, William Blackstone, was one of the most influential men in the country, the owner of vast companies and a legacy built on wealth and authority. Ethan, at only 8 years old, had everything one could imagine: his own playroom, toys that most children only dream of, and a future set before him with unimaginable privileges. But there was something more to Ethan that no one had noticed, something that had been quietly growing in the shadows of his luxurious life. Lynn, the daughter of the housekeeper, had worked in the Blackstone mansion for as long as she could remember. At just 10 years old, she wasn't like the others in the mansion. She didn't have the power or the wealth that flowed freely through the halls. She had only a humble background, with her family being the lowest among the staff. But what no one knew was that Lynn possessed something special, a gift for languages, a rare talent passed down from her grandmother. And it was this gift that was about to change everything. Lynn had been teaching Ethan a secret language, one that she had learned from her grandmother. A language that wasn't just a means of communication, but a bridge to something deeper, something more profound. The language was ancient, a mix of symbols and sounds that had been passed down through generations. For Lynn, it was a way to stay connected to her heritage, a small treasure hidden in her heart. For Ethan, it was a world he had never encountered before, and it fascinated him. One afternoon, as Lynn and Ethan sat in a quiet corner of the mansion, speaking in hushed tones, something unexpected happened. Ethan spoke the words of the language fluently, as if it came naturally to him. Lynn stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening in disbelief. How could Ethan, a boy who had never been exposed to this language, speak it so perfectly? She was about to say something when the door to the room creaked open, and in walked William Blackstone, his imposing figure filling the doorway. He paused when he saw the two children, his son speaking with Lynn in a language that was foreign to him. The billionaire's eyes narrowed. He had always thought of Lynn as just another maid's daughter, someone who existed only in the background of his grand life. But now, he realized something was happening that he couldn't ignore. He had heard nothing about this language. No one in his circle spoke of it, and certainly, no one had taught it to his son. He stepped into the room, his voice cutting through the quiet. "What is this?" he asked, his tone sharp. Lynn, startled by his sudden appearance, stammered. "It's just a language I taught Ethan." Ethan looked up at his father, his eyes filled with a mix of confusion and curiosity. William Blackstone walked closer, his gaze now fixed on his son. He was about to speak, but then, something happened. As he looked at the two of them, Lynn and his son, something clicked in his mind. The words, the connection, the quiet exchange between them. It was more than just a game. It was real, it was powerful, and it was something that had been hidden right in front of him. The truth was right there, and William was about to learn that the talents of those he had overlooked were far more significant than he could ever have imagined. The silence that followed his realization was thick with tension, and as Lynn looked at him, her expression not of fear, but of quiet strength, William Blackstone was left speechless. The tension in the room was palpable. William Blackstone stood still, staring at his son, Ethan, who was still speaking, in the strange, secret language that Lynn had taught him. The billionaire had never been one to express much emotion, but something about this moment made his chest tighten. For the first time in years, he felt something that was not control or dominance. He felt confusion, and beneath that, a deep sense of regret. How could he have missed something so significant happening right under his nose? His mind raced, trying to piece together what he had just seen. Ethan, his son, who was already brilliant in so many ways, had picked up this language effortlessly. A language that Lynn, a mere maid's daughter, had taught him in secret. A language that William had never even heard of. The silence in the room was broken by Ethan's voice, speaking to Lynn in the same foreign tongue. The words were fluid, as natural as if they had been speaking it for years. Lynn looked up at William, her eyes wide with nervousness. But there was something else there, something that spoke of quiet strength. She had been teaching Ethan in secret for months now, but she had never expected him to pick it up so quickly, let alone speak it with such ease. She had been the one to encourage him, telling him it was just a fun game, a way to pass the time. But now, seeing her work revealed in front of William, she wasn't sure how he would react. Would he be angry? Would he fire her family? Or would he finally see her as something more than just a servant? William, still standing frozen in place, finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "What is this language, Lynn?" he asked, his eyes narrowing as he stared at her. Lynn took a deep breath, gathering her courage. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure what to say. "It's an ancient language, Mr. Blackstone. One that's been passed down through my family for generations. It's not something many people know, but I thought it would be fun to teach Ethan." Ethan, still unaware of the weight of the conversation, looked at his father and smiled. "Dad, Lynn says it's a secret language. Can I learn more of it? It's really cool." William looked at his son, his gaze softening for a moment. Despite the unexpected turn of events, he couldn't help but feel a small sense of pride for Ethan's curiosity. But then his attention shifted back to Lynn. He studied her for a long moment, trying to process what she had just revealed. "You've been teaching him this language?" he asked, his voice now tinged with disbelief. Lynn nodded, her eyes cast down. "Yes, Mr. Blackstone. I didn't mean for it to become something more, but I couldn't stop once he showed interest. He's a very bright boy." William took another step closer to the two of them, his mind still reeling from the shock. "You never told me about this," he said, his voice more accusing now. Lynn's heart skipped a beat. She had known this moment would come, but she hadn't expected it to feel so intense. "I didn't think it would matter, sir," she replied softly. "He's just a child. I didn't want to cause any trouble." William's expression shifted, and for the first time, Lynn saw a flicker of something human in him. "No trouble," he said, his voice quieter now. "I've built this empire, and I've always thought that I controlled everything. My businesses, my home, my son's future. But now I see that there's more to it than that. More than what I could ever have imagined." The realization was settling in, and William Blackstone didn't know how to react. Here, in his own home, in front of his son, he had just learned that there were things beyond his control. Things that he had missed, overlooked, or simply never bothered to notice. "I need to think about this," he said finally, his tone calmer than before. Lynn looked up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had expected anger, maybe even a dismissal of everything she had worked for, but instead, William Blackstone seemed thoughtful. It was a strange feeling, but one that left her cautiously hopeful. Ethan, oblivious to the tension, skipped over to his father, grinning ear to ear. "Can I keep learning the secret language, Dad? Please." William blinked, his mind still processing, before he nodded slowly. "Yes, Ethan, you can keep learning it. But we'll need to talk about this more later." Ethan's face lit up, and he hugged his father tightly. Lynn, standing a few feet away, watched this exchange with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. She had no idea what William Blackstone's next move would be, but for the first time, she wondered if there might be more to her life here in this mansion than just being a servant. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance for something more. The next few days in the Blackstone mansion were filled with an odd sense of tension. William Blackstone could not shake the feeling that his carefully constructed world was slowly unraveling. It was a feeling he wasn't used to. He had always been in control, always had the final say in everything. But now, things were different. He couldn't stop thinking about Lynn and her secret language. It wasn't just that his son, Ethan, had been learning it. It was the realization that Lynn, the maid's daughter, had something more than just a basic education. She had knowledge, she had talent, and she had kept it hidden from him all this time. William tried to push the thought aside, but it gnawed at him. He had to confront it. One afternoon, he called Lynn into his study. Ethan was at school, and the house was unusually quiet. As she entered the room, Lynn's heart began to race. She had been waiting for this moment, but she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. She had no idea what William was going to say. He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "Lynn," he began, his voice serious but not unkind. "We need to talk about what's been happening with Ethan. This language you've been teaching him. It's not just a game, is it?" Lynn swallowed hard. "No, Mr. Blackstone," she said softly. "It's something more. It's part of my heritage, something my grandmother passed down to me. I didn't mean for it to become a big deal, but Ethan," he picked it up so quickly. It just felt right to teach him. William nodded slowly, his mind working through the implications. "I never knew," he said quietly. "I've been so focused on running my empire that I've missed so much. I didn't even know you had this kind of knowledge, Lynn. Why didn't you tell me?" Lynn hesitated. "I didn't think it mattered, sir. I didn't think it was something you would care about. I'm just a maid's daughter. I didn't want to cause any trouble." William leaned forward in his chair, his gaze fixed on her. "You've underestimated yourself, Lynn. You're not just a maid's daughter. You're much more than that. And I've been blind to it." Lynn looked at him, confused. "I don't understand, sir." William sighed, rubbing his temples. "I've always believed that my wealth, my position, my influence were the most important things in life. But now, I see that there are things that matter more. Things like knowledge and family, and even something as simple as a language. I've spent so much time building my empire, I forgot what it means to be human." Lynn's heart pounded in her chest. She had never expected William Blackstone to say anything like this. She had always seen him as a man of cold, hard business, someone who only cared about numbers and power. But now, in front of her, she saw something different. William's next words caught her off guard. "I want you to teach me this language, Lynn. Not just for Ethan, but for me. I've spent my whole life building something, but I've never truly understood the importance of connecting with others, especially those who are different from me. I want to learn what you know." Lynn was speechless. She had never imagined that William Blackstone, the billionaire, would ask her to teach him something. And yet, there he was, asking for her knowledge, not for his wealth or status, but for something much more valuable, understanding. "I'll teach you, Mr. Blackstone," she said softly. "But it's not just the language. It's about the culture, the history, the stories behind the words. It's about understanding where we come from and who we are." William nodded, his eyes intense. "I want to learn it all. And I want you to teach Ethan as well. You're not just his teacher, Lynn. You're part of this family now. I see that now." Lynn didn't know how to respond. She had never imagined this day would come, but here it was. William Blackstone, the man who had always been the epitome of power, was asking her, the maid's daughter, to teach him something she had once thought no one would care about. As she left his study that day, her mind was spinning. She had been given an opportunity she could never have dreamed of. But what did this mean for her future? What would happen to the life she had known, the quiet existence she had kept hidden away in the shadows of the Blackstone mansion? The answers weren't clear, but for the first time in her life, Lynn felt a sense of hope. Hope that things could be different. Hope that she wasn't just a servant in someone else's world, but someone who could make a real difference. The next few weeks were filled with lessons, both for Lynn and William. Lynn taught him the language, and through it, she shared pieces of her own culture, her history, and her family's legacy. William, in turn, began to change. His focus shifted from mere wealth and power to something deeper, something more meaningful. He began to appreciate the things he had once overlooked, the small moments, the quiet conversations, and the people who had helped him along the way. Ethan, too, was learning. He had become more curious, more open-minded, and more connected to the world around him. The lessons he had learned from Lynn and his father were shaping him into a different kind of person, one who understood that wealth and power weren't the only things that mattered. As for Lynn, she had become a part of the family in a way she never expected. She had given them more than just knowledge. She had given them a glimpse into a world they had never seen before, a world where the true value of a person wasn't measured by their wealth or status, but by their heart, their character, and their ability to understand and connect with others. The days that followed were filled with a subtle but profound shift in the Blackstone household. William Blackstone, the once hard-nosed billionaire, found himself changed in ways he couldn't have anticipated. He spent hours learning the language Lynn had taught Ethan, and with each passing day, he uncovered more than just words. He discovered a connection to a world he had long ignored. the world of culture, history, and the quiet power of understanding. As he delved deeper into the lessons, he started to see things differently. The mansion, once a symbol of his wealth and status, now seemed cold and distant. The people who worked in it, the ones he had always seen as part of the background, suddenly seemed more important to him. Lynn, in particular, had become a source of insight, not just as a teacher, but as someone who had a depth of experience that he had overlooked for far too long. Ethan, too, was changing. The young boy who once took everything for granted now approached life with more curiosity and respect for the people around him. He began asking Lynn more questions, eager to learn about the language, the culture, and even the customs that Lynn had brought into their home. William couldn't help but notice the transformation in his son. Ethan had always been sharp, but now there was a newfound maturity in his approach to life. One evening, as they sat together in the family room, Ethan turned to Lynn and asked, "Lynn, can I teach my friends at school the language you taught me? I want them to understand it, too." Lynn smiled, surprised by his request. "I think that would be a wonderful idea, Ethan," she replied, her voice soft but filled with pride. "But remember, it's not just about the language. It's about the meaning behind it. It's about connecting with others and understanding their stories." Ethan nodded seriously, his young mind grasping the deeper message she was sharing. As the weeks passed, the family continued to grow closer. William found himself spending more time with Ethan and Lynn, engaging in conversations that were once unthinkable. The power of the secret language had opened doors in their relationship that had remained closed for years. But not everyone in the Blackstone household was as welcoming of this change. Delilah, William's fiancée, had been growing more distant, her smile becoming more forced with each passing day. She had always prided herself on her position and the life that came with it. But now, seeing William's growing admiration for Lynn and his increasing involvement with Ethan's education, she began to feel threatened. One evening, as they sat at dinner, Delilah finally spoke her mind. "William, I don't understand," she said, her voice laced with frustration. "Why are you so focused on this language thing? It's just a game. It's not going to help you build your empire." William, usually quick to dismiss such comments, found himself pausing. He had thought about the question, but he had never voiced the answer out loud. "It's not just about building an empire anymore, Delilah," he said slowly, his gaze fixed on her. "It's about understanding. It's about connecting with people. I've spent so much time building something material, I've forgotten what really matters." Delilah's expression hardened. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice rising. "You're letting a maid's daughter teach you what's important? She's just a servant, William. You can't let her influence you like this." The words hit William harder than he expected, but he didn't flinch. He knew what he had to say next. "Lynn has taught me more than I've learned from anyone else in this house. She's opened my eyes to something I've been blind to. And Ethan, he's learning things I never taught him. I think I've been wrong, Delilah. I think I've been wrong about a lot of things." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Delilah stared at him, disbelief written all over her face. "You can't mean that," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "You've worked your whole life for what we have, for the power, the wealth. And now you're telling me it doesn't matter?" William shook his head. "What good is wealth and power if you don't know how to truly connect with others? What good is it if you've lost sight of what really matters?" Delilah stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You've changed, William. You've changed in ways I don't understand. And I'm not sure I want to be part of it anymore." Without another word, she walked out of the room, leaving William and Lynn alone. William exhaled deeply, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He had made his choice. He had chosen a path that led him away from the cold pursuit of power and towards something more meaningful. Lynn, who had been quietly watching the exchange, spoke softly. "You've made the right choice, Mr. Blackstone." William looked at her, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I hope so, Lynn. I really do." As Delilah's footsteps faded down the hallway, William knew that the journey ahead would be difficult. But for the first time in his life, he felt like he was heading in the right direction. And it was all thanks to the one thing he had overlooked for so long: the simple, quiet power of understanding. As the days passed, the atmosphere in the Blackstone mansion shifted once again. The news of William Blackstone's change in perspective had spread quickly throughout the household, and Lynn could feel the weight of it in the way the other staff treated her. They were beginning to look at her differently. No longer was she just the maid's daughter. She was someone who had the power to influence the course of events. But with this newfound respect came a heavy responsibility. Lynn had always kept to herself, living quietly in the shadows of the grand mansion, never expecting to be a part of its high society. But now, she found herself at the center of something much larger than she had ever imagined. She and William spent more time together than ever before, not just in lessons about the secret language, but in deep conversations about life, business, and the things they had both missed. Lynn had never imagined that teaching someone like William Blackstone could lead to such profound changes. He had become a student of sorts, but more importantly, he had become a man who was starting to see beyond his empire. The connection between them had deepened, and as they spent hours together, Lynn realized that she had come to care about him in ways she had not expected. William had always been a man of control, but now he was learning to let go. He had begun to appreciate the simple things, the conversations, the shared moments of laughter, the beauty in the small things. But despite the growing bond between them, the road ahead was not without its challenges. Delilah had left the mansion, her departure leaving a noticeable void in William's life. And while the tension between him and his fiancée had been building for months, it was now official. Delilah had made it clear that she no longer shared the same vision for their future. William could feel the absence of her presence, but in a strange way, he also felt a sense of relief. He knew that he had made the right decision, but it was not an easy one. Lynn, however, had a different perspective. As much as she had enjoyed the time spent with William, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were moving too quickly. She had never intended for their connection to grow so deep, and now, she found herself wondering if she was truly ready for what came next. The conversations about the language, the moments of shared understanding, had brought them closer, but the question lingered. Was this a genuine connection, or was it a product of the circumstances? Lynn's thoughts were interrupted one evening when William called for her in the middle of dinner. The mansion was quiet, and the usual hum of daily life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. But there was something different about the way William had summoned her. It was not a request for a lesson or a casual conversation. It felt more like a turning point. When Lynn entered his study, William was standing by the window, looking out over the sprawling city below. The lights twinkled in the distance, and the room was bathed in a soft glow. He turned to face her as she entered, his expression serious but gentle. "Lynn, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice calm but filled with an emotion that Lynn couldn't quite place. "I've spent so much of my life focused on building this empire, on chasing power and success. I've sacrificed so much along the way, but now I realize there's something I've missed. And that something is you." Lynn's heart skipped a beat. She had always known William to be a man of few words, and hearing him speak so openly, so vulnerably, took her by surprise. She hadn't expected this. "I don't know what this means," William continued, his gaze never leaving hers. "But I want to find out. I want to understand what it means to truly live, to experience life beyond the walls I've built around myself." Lynn swallowed hard, her thoughts racing. She had never imagined a moment like this. "William, she began, but her words faltered. She didn't know how to respond. She had always kept her distance, never allowing herself to believe that someone like him could see her as more than just the maid's daughter. But now, in this moment, everything was different. William stepped closer, his hand reaching out to gently touch hers. "You've already shown me so much, Lynn. You've shown me what it means to be present, to be human. And I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." Lynn could feel the weight of his words, and for the first time, she realized that perhaps this connection was not just born out of circumstance. Perhaps there was something real between them, something that could change both of their lives. But as she looked into his eyes, she knew that this would not be an easy journey. There were still so many things that needed to be figured out, so many questions that needed to be answered. And as she stood there with him, she realized that the answers would come in time. But for now, all that mattered was that they had both chosen to be vulnerable, to open themselves to something new. And in that moment, Lynn made a decision. She would let herself experience whatever this was, whatever this connection could become. She had spent her whole life hiding in the shadows, but now, she was ready to step into the light. The weeks that followed were filled with a strange mix of anticipation and uncertainty. Lynn and William had found a new rhythm in their lives, one that was no longer defined by power or status, but by something far more meaningful, understanding and connection. But as their bond deepened, so did the challenges they faced. Delilah's departure had left a noticeable gap in the mansion, and although William felt the absence, he was also relieved. It had become clear to him that he had been living a life shaped by expectations, not by his true desires. But the path ahead was not without obstacles. Word of William's change in perspective had spread, not just within the walls of his mansion, but throughout his business empire. Many of his closest advisors, the people who had helped him build his fortune, were not pleased with the changes he was making. They had seen him as a leader who valued results above all else, who made decisions with a sharp eye for profit. Now, they were beginning to question his judgment. One afternoon, as William was reviewing some reports in his office, he received an unexpected visit from one of his oldest friends and business partners, Gregory Miles. Gregory had been with William since the early days, helping him navigate the corporate world and build Blackstone Enterprises into the powerhouse it had become. He was a man who valued logic, efficiency, and, above all, success. When Gregory walked into the office, he didn't waste any time getting to the point. "William, we need to talk," he said, his tone serious. "I've heard the rumors, and I have to say, I'm concerned about the direction you're taking. You're not the same man you were a few months ago. I get it, you're going through some personal changes, but we can't afford to let that affect the business." William put down the report he was reading and looked up at his friend. "Gregory, I know what you're thinking," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But I've spent my whole life building this empire, and I've realized something. There's more to life than just money. There's more to success than just numbers on a sheet. I've learned that the people around me, the ones I've overlooked, they matter too. And that includes Lynn." Gregory's expression faltered for a moment. He had known William for years, but this was not the William he was used to. "Lynn?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "You're talking about the maid's daughter? William, I don't think you realize how dangerous this is. We've built everything on hard work, on merit. You can't just change the way you think and expect everything to stay the same." William stood up from his desk, his eyes locking with Gregory's. "I'm not changing my values, Gregory," he said, his voice resolute. "I'm realizing that the way I've seen the world has been too narrow. I've spent so much time focused on the business side of things that I've ignored the people who have helped me along the way. Lynn has taught me more than any business meeting ever could." Gregory shook his head. "You're losing touch with reality, my friend. This is business we're talking about. If you let personal feelings cloud your judgment, it will cost you." William paused for a moment, letting Gregory's words sink in. He had always trusted his friend's judgment, but this time, something felt different. "I've thought about it, Gregory," William said, his voice softer now. "I know this isn't going to be easy, but I can't keep living in a world where everything is about control and profit. I want something more, something that's real, and I'm willing to fight for that." Gregory sighed, looking at William with a mixture of concern and frustration. "You're making a huge mistake," he said, his voice low. "You're going to regret this." With that, Gregory turned and walked out of the office, leaving William alone with his thoughts. The conversation had left him unsettled, but it had also reinforced his resolve. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be more challenges, more people questioning his decisions, but he was ready to face them. Meanwhile, Lynn had been quietly observing the changes in the mansion. She could see the tension between William and his business associates, but she also saw something else, a determination in his eyes that told her he was serious about this new direction. She had always been a quiet observer of life, but now she found herself at the center of it all. And as she watched William navigate these challenges, she realized that, for the first time, she felt like she was truly part of something. She wasn't just the maid's daughter anymore. She was someone who had the power to make a difference. And as she looked at William, she saw a man who was no longer just a businessman, but someone who was learning to be human again. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Lynn felt hopeful. She had never imagined that a simple language, a connection between two people from different worlds, could change everything. But now, she knew that anything was possible. The following days in the Blackstone mansion brought an unexpected sense of change. William Blackstone was becoming someone he had never imagined, someone who valued relationships and personal connections more than the empire he had spent decades building. But as his vision shifted, so did the reactions of those around him. His advisors, who had always followed his lead without question, now began to express their concerns. Gregory's words still echoed in his mind. "You're making a huge mistake." But William knew, deep down, that he had to stay the course. He had made his choice, and he would not go back. Meanwhile, Lynn, though grateful for the opportunities that had arisen, could not help but feel the weight of the changes taking place. She had been in the mansion for so long, but now, she was not just a maid's daughter. She was part of a much larger story. She had never imagined that a simple act of teaching Ethan a secret language could bring her to this point. Yet here she was, watching William grow into someone who was no longer focused solely on business. And Ethan, the young boy she had taught so much, was no longer just the son of a billionaire. He was a child who was beginning to understand the world in new and unexpected ways. One afternoon, as Lynn sat with Ethan in the garden, the boy turned to her with a question that caught her off guard. "Lynn, why do people always look down on us?" Ethan asked, his face serious for his age. Lynn paused, unsure of how to answer. She had never really talked about this with him. "What do you mean, Ethan?" she asked, her voice soft. "Like, why are we different from everyone else? Why do people treat us like we don't matter?" Ethan's question hung in the air, and Lynn felt the weight of it. She had always known the divide between the wealthy and those who served them, but hearing it come from Ethan's lips made it feel real in a way she hadn't expected. She thought for a moment before speaking. "Well, Ethan, sometimes people forget that everyone has something valuable to offer. They look at things like money or status, and they think that's what matters the most. But that's not true. You see, everyone has something special inside of them." Ethan looked at her, his eyes searching. "Like what?" "Like knowledge, like kindness, like the ability to see the world in a different way. Some people have money, others have talents. And sometimes, it's the people without money who have the most important gifts to offer." Ethan was quiet for a moment, his small fingers tracing the edges of a flower. "I think I understand," he said slowly. "You're special, Lynn. You have that secret language, and you taught me it. No one else can do that." Lynn smiled at him, feeling a sense of warmth in her heart. "You're right, Ethan. Everyone has their own special talents. And those talents are what make us who we are." As she spoke, Lynn realized that what she had said was true, not just for Ethan, but for herself as well. She had always felt invisible, but now, for the first time, she was beginning to see that she had something to offer the world. And so did everyone around her. The next few days were filled with more lessons, both for Lynn and William. They continued to learn the secret language, but now the lessons were more than just about words. They were about understanding, about seeing each other in a new light. William was beginning to see the value in the people around him, the people who had always been in the background of his life, like Lynn. He realized that there was more to life than business deals and boardrooms. There was a richness to the world that he had overlooked, and it was right in front of him. One evening, as Lynn and William sat in the living room, talking about the language and the lessons they had learned, William turned to her with a serious expression. "Lynn," he said, his voice low, "I want you to know something. I've made mistakes in my life. I've overlooked people, and I've been too focused on things that don't really matter. But I'm trying to change, and I want you to know that I see you. I see what you've done, and I see what you can offer. You're not just the maid's daughter. You're someone who has a gift, and I'm grateful for that." Lynn was taken aback by his words. She had never expected this kind of recognition from someone like William Blackstone. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw sincerity. She realized that this wasn't just a passing moment. This was a real change. William Blackstone had changed, and so had she. The days that followed were filled with new challenges, but they were challenges that both William and Lynn were ready to face together. They had built a connection that was deeper than business or status. It was a connection of understanding, of seeing each other for who they truly were. And as the mansion grew quieter without Delilah's presence, William knew that the road ahead would not be easy. But he was no longer afraid of the challenges. For the first time in his life, he was ready to face them with an open heart. As the weeks went on, William found himself fully immersed in a world that was not defined by spreadsheets and stock portfolios, but by human connection and the understanding of those around him. His relationship with Lynn continued to evolve, becoming something deeper and more meaningful with each passing day. He had learned the language, but now he was learning something even more important, the language of the heart. Lynn, too, had been changing. The woman who had once thought of herself as invisible, living in the shadows of others' wealth and power, was now beginning to see her own worth. She had always been the quiet observer, the one who stayed in the background, but now she felt seen. She felt valued. Her relationship with Ethan, too, had grown. The boy she had once taught the secret language was no longer just a student, but someone she could connect with on a deeper level. And as she watched him grow, she realized that this was a family, not just an employer and servant. The shift in their dynamic wasn't without its challenges, of course. There were still whispers among the staff, murmurs about the changes in the mansion, and questions about how far William would go in breaking from tradition. Gregory, his old friend and business partner, had remained distant, still unable to understand why William was making such drastic changes in his personal life. He continued to criticize William for losing focus, reminding him that business success had always been the cornerstone of their lives. One evening, Gregory paid William a visit at the mansion. The conversation, as it had many times before, began with a discussion of business. But this time, it took a different turn. "William, I still don't understand what's going on with you," Gregory said, pacing back and forth in the large living room. "You've turned your back on everything that made you who you are, the business, the empire. And for what? A maid's daughter? This is a huge mistake. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment." William, sitting calmly in his chair, looked at Gregory with a mixture of patience and understanding. "Gregory, I've spent my whole life building this empire, and I've sacrificed so much along the way. But I've realized something. It's not just about what I've built. It's about what I'm leaving behind. I'm leaving behind relationships, experiences, and connections with the people around me. I've been blind to that for too long." Gregory stopped pacing and looked at William, incredulous. "So you're telling me that everything we've worked for, everything we've built, is meaningless now?" William shook his head slowly. "No, Gregory. It's not meaningless. But it's not the only thing that matters. I've realized that there's more to life than business. There's love, there's understanding, there's family. And that's what I've been missing all along." Gregory stood there, silent for a moment, before his face hardened. "You're making a mistake, William. You can't afford to lose sight of what's important." William smiled softly, his eyes calm. "I haven't lost sight of it, Gregory. I've found something new. And it's something that's more important than anything I've ever had." The conversation ended on a tense note, but William didn't feel defeated. He felt stronger than ever. The weight of his decision was heavy, but it was a weight he was willing to carry. The days continued to pass, and the changes in the mansion became more noticeable. Lynn, though still humble in nature, began to take on more responsibility, not just as a teacher but as an equal. She had started organizing lessons for Ethan, not just in language, but in history, culture, and the arts. William, for his part, had become more involved in his son's education, joining them in the lessons and finding joy in the process. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth and solitude, had become a place of learning, connection, and family. Yet, despite the progress, the tension between William and his old business partners remained. They couldn't understand his shift in priorities, and that was something William knew would never change. But as he looked at Lynn, at Ethan, and at the life he was building, he knew that he had made the right choice. It wasn't about the empire anymore. It was about the people who mattered most. And for the first time, he felt truly alive. One evening, as Lynn and William sat together in the garden, watching the sunset, William turned to her, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Lynn," he said softly. "You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible." Lynn, feeling a warmth in her chest, smiled. "I've only shown you what was always there, William. The real change comes from within." He nodded, his gaze never leaving her. "I've learned that now," he said, "and I'll never forget it." As the sun dipped below the horizon, William knew that the road ahead would continue to be challenging. But he also knew that he was no longer walking it alone. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of possibility. And for the first time in his life, he was ready to face it with an open heart and an open mind. Months passed since the changes began to take root within the Blackstone mansion. William had transformed not only his business, but his entire approach to life. He had stepped away from the cold calculations of profit margins and boardroom battles to focus on something more meaningful, the relationships that truly defined him. Lynn, the maid's daughter, had become much more than a teacher of a secret language. She was now a trusted ally and an essential part of the Blackstone family. The bond between them had grown into something unspoken, yet deeply understood. As William spent more time with Lynn and Ethan, their lessons took on new dimensions. It wasn't just about the language anymore. It was about understanding people, their histories, and their values. William had started to visit the family's hometown, traveling beyond the confines of his empire to see how others lived, to hear their stories, and to connect on a deeper level. He learned more about Lynn's life, about the sacrifices her family had made, and the cultural richness that had shaped her. Each trip was a reminder of how far he had come. Ethan, too, had changed. He no longer was just the son of a billionaire. He had become a young boy eager to learn not only about business, but also about the human condition. His questions were more thoughtful, his curiosity broader, and his respect for others grew exponentially. The mansion, once a place of solitude and power, had transformed into a home filled with laughter, learning, and love. But even with all the progress, there were moments of tension. William knew that the outside world would never fully understand his decisions. His business partners continued to question his leadership, and Gregory remained one of his fiercest critics. But none of that mattered anymore. The relationships he had with Lynn, Ethan, and the people who had worked for him all these years mattered far more than any profit report. One day, as the family sat down for dinner, William looked around the table at Lynn, Ethan, and the staff members who had become like family. For the first time, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He wasn't just the man who had built an empire. He was someone who had learned the value of connection, humility, and the importance of seeing people for who they truly were. The world outside could continue its judgments, but inside his home, there was peace. "I'm proud of what we've built," William said, looking at each of them, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. "But the real legacy isn't in what I've achieved in business. It's in the relationships I've nurtured, the lives I've touched, and the people who have helped me grow." Lynn smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She had never imagined that the quiet life she had known would change so dramatically. She was no longer just a maid's daughter. She had become someone who mattered, someone whose voice was heard. Ethan, sitting beside her, looked up at his father, a proud smile on his face. He knew that the lessons he had learned from Lynn and his father would shape him for the rest of his life. As they continued their meal, the conversation turned to future plans, trips they wanted to take, things they wanted to learn, and ideas they wanted to explore. There was no longer a separation between the wealthy and the poor, the employer and the employee. There was just a family, united by their shared experiences and the understanding that no one was more important than the other. William looked out the window as the sun set over the city. The road ahead was still unknown, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. He had spent so many years focused on the future, on building an empire that would outlast him. But now, he realized that what mattered most wasn't the future, it was the present. The relationships he had formed, the love he had shared, and the knowledge he had gained would be the true legacy he left behind. As the night fell and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, William knew that he had found the greatest treasure of all, connection. And with Lynn and Ethan by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. This captivating story delves into the journey of a billionaire who experiences a life-changing transformation after a chance encounter with the maid's daughter. What follows is a series of powerful events that turn his world upside down and redefine his values, shifting his focus from wealth and control to human connection and understanding. As he learns from the unassuming maid's daughter and his own son, this millionaire discovers the true meaning of success, one that transcends financial achievement and embraces the importance of relationships and empathy. The story unfolds as he challenges his own beliefs, faced with the choices that question what truly matters in life. Through his connection with those around him, especially the young boy and the woman who teaches him more than a secret language, this millionaire begins to see the world through a completely new lens. As the events unfold, the themes of love, growth, and self-realization become central, reminding us that millionaire stories are not just about wealth, but about the deeper, more meaningful experiences that shape a person's life. In the end, this millionaire learns that the greatest wealth is not in the bank accounts, but in the people who touch our lives and the lessons we learn along the way. In this emotional journey, the billionaire's transformation becomes one of the most powerful millionaire stories you will hear, showing that even the richest people can learn life's most valuable lessons from those they least expect. This story is a testament to the fact that millionaire stories are not always about gold, but about the simple acts of kindness and understanding that truly define our lives.